welcome back to the 4 Degrees to the Streets podcast. I'm your host, Jasmine Jones Bynes. What's going on? I am so excited for this conversation. I'm joined by my favorite Midwest people, Nina Idemudia and Dayna Cole. They are the co-host of the Queen Tone podcast, and Jermaine Ruffin, who is the host of the Streets Are Planning podcast. What's going on, y'all? Welcome to the show.
Hey. Glad to be here.
Hey, what up?
This episode is part 3 of a 3-part series preparing us all for the A Planner with a Purpose activation in Detroit as part of the National Planning Association conference happening there. A Planner with a Purpose is a curated set of experiences designed to support planners and civic leaders navigating an increasingly complex, demanding moment. Grounding in clarity, and collective power, the weekend creates space for honest conversation, practical tools, and connection beyond traditional professional programming. You can join us in Detroit beginning on Thursday, April 23rd. We'll be getting into this among many other conversations. Nina, Dayna, Jermaine, welcome to the show. Let's go around the horn and let's allow you guys to introduce yourself to our audience.
Yes, I can go first. As stated, my name is Nina. Let's see. I consider myself the Olivia Pope of planning, and no, I will not be explaining any further. But if you're a millennial, you know what I'm talking about. I'm a gladiator.
Handled.
I get shit done. Okay? Handled. Proud Detroiter, also proud Aquarius with lots of Capricorn placements. Very important for this for anybody interacting with me. But I'm also just a lover of people. I like to connect people, and so yeah, that's who I am. And thanks for having us on your show.
Absolutely.
Thanks. I am Dayna. I am a music enthusiast. I'm always say I'm at the heart a little Black girl from the east side of Detroit. For career-wise, I'm a tech leader at the intersection of music, technology, and innovation. And I also am an audio entrepreneur. So I have an audio consultancy that focuses on podcasts, music, and then audiobooks as well. And then I am also a Capricorn, which is why me and Nina are best friends. So we host a podcast and we're also friends and line sisters.
Listen, that's kind of hard to follow up. Listen, I'm gonna lead with Jay Ruffin, host of the Streets of Planning. I'm a Gemini. I don't know about the Capricorn placements
that's my
and all that
rising
other kind of stuff.
I fuck with Geminis.
A lot of people don't, but listen, you're missing out if you don't rock with a Gemini or you don't have one in your life. So that I'm a lover of cities and neighborhoods on a real level. Every city and country that I go to, I try to make sure that I'm hitting as many neighborhoods as possible. And I mean, walking, riding a bike, any way that you can see them and observe. I love it. And then, finally, I'll just say that, I like to think of myself. I'm not, Olivia Pope on that level, you know what I mean? But, but I like to think that, there's like the king of New York or whatever, but I like to think of myself as like, the king of Black urban planners out here in these streets.
Period.
Where, I look at, that's how I try to carry myself. And when you got to make sure that you are also, as a king, that you are surrounding yourself with queen energy. So I'm grateful to be on this episode today with these wonderful queens and listening to them engage you in conversation. It's a beautiful thing. So grateful to be a part of the series.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to have all 3 of y'all on the show. Nina has been a guest on the show previously, and Jermaine, you on my list of people to reach out to have as a guest on the show. So we'll spin the block real soon. I'm super excited for this conversation. Like I mentioned, it's the 3rd part of a 3-part series that we're having. This episode is titled Institutions, Power, and Professional Infrastructure. We're going to be exploring the relationship between working within existing institutions and existing systems in comparison to building new ones, and exploring what institutions need reform versus which ones need 100% total replacement. You'll hear themes of influence and power, of alignment, of community support, of what it means to be in community and what it means to be activated in your neighborhood. The conversation will dig into how urban planners and people who work in the industry, as well as residents, Dayna is our resident on the show. She is our non-planner on the show. We'll be digging into how all of us experience cities, and interact with our institutions, and how well or how not well those institutions support or harm communities. So let's get into it. The first thing I think is always helpful is, what do we mean by institutions? And so just a quick Google search online, Webster has it defined in two ways, and I think they're really important. The first is, institutions are an established organization or corporation, such as a bank or a university, of a specific charter. Or an institution can be a significant practice, relationship, or organization within society or culture. That second definition, right, that institution can be a practice or a relationship, was intriguing to me. So digging into that one just a little bit further, the American Economic Association defines institutions this way in a white paper. Institutions are the humanly devised constraints that structure political, economic, and social interaction. They consist of both formal and informal constraints. So if you think of something like marriage or capitalism, those are institutions the same way that the American Planning Association is an institution. So with that concept in mind, what are your reactions, first of all, to those definitions? Do you see any ways for that definition to be improved or expanded upon?
So at first listen for me, it makes sense, especially when you add that definition from the white paper, as like it being, because sometimes people are like, wait, is this something I can actually physically touch, or is this something that's like happening in the ether, right? And so when we talk about institutional racism, or like the hierarchy of capitalism, like, yeah, you can't touch it per se, but it absolutely impacts our lives. And then there's like literal institutions with rules and guidelines and policies, and so to me it resonated with me to have that kind of spelled out in both.
Absolutely.
My first thought was, and we'll likely get into this in the conversation, but even when you said like marriage is an institution, and while that's not something like I walk into a building and that's an institution, but my thought is, how does socialization play into that? Because marriage is an institution, but you add the layer of like religion that can change how people operate in that institution, what it means to people. If you add in the layer of like gender into it, how do you view marriage, which leads how do you go into it, which leads how do you utilize it, and things like that. So that definition makes sense, but even with that definition laid out, then it makes me think of like, oh, how do all these different things intersect?
Yeah, and I would say, the definitions for me also triggered like this thought of like, where does that power come from an institution, right? So these institutions, whether they're like you said, marriage, or whether it's other kind of informal institutions, they all have a source of power. And is it the power that we give it? Is the power that's inherent because of the institution that it is and what it represents? And so for me, those are kind of some of the dynamics that immediately kind of come to mind, because like you mentioned, some institutions are meant to be bust down completely, and some you might want to try to figure out how you build it up, but what are the powers that generate the energy to do either?
Absolutely. And as we think about that, what are some of the institutions that you all feel you are a part of, or your maybe it's an actual organization, something you can actually physically go to or pay a due to join, or something in the ethos? Like, in many ways, even if we don't think of ourselves as capitalists, are we members of the capitalism institution? So just thinking, if we want to share
Let me get my
list. The deposit of my check and then the instant paying of bills proves that I'm in the institution of capitalism for sure.
100%.
I mean, like, unfortunately, I may not buy into all of the parts of capitalism, but I think this is interesting because this is an institution that you really can't. You would have to do a lot of work to get yourself out of the institution of capitalism. Like, you would literally probably need to move in the middle of nowhere. Even in the United States, that might be hard, like completely be off the grid in order to like separate yourself from capitalism, which obviously shows how strong and powerful it is as a concept, and it's something that we perpetuate every day, because capitalism is a base of decisions that all of us collectively, part of a particular culture, are buying into every day, even if we don't name it. And And so, yeah, I think of myself kind of like in an institution that I may not want to be in. And then there's institutions that I do want to be in, right? Like like I'm a Delta. I want to be a Delta. I fought to, be one, and now we're about to celebrate our 15th anniversary. So it's like, oh, that is an institution that I love. It gave me a lot of care. It still does. It still feeds me to this very moment. And so like, yeah, there's definitely those kind of institutions that I've bought into and like continue to perpetuate, I guess, in a way of saying, even talking about being a Delta, right? I'm not like, telling people to be Deltas, but I am saying, oh, if you like me, I am part of this organization, and that happens to be a reflection of how I got to where I am. And so like, even in an unspoken way, we validate institutions just by our participation, which includes APA, right? So yeah.
I would say for me, even when you said institutions and with that definition, now I'm like running everything through my head, but I would say Delta, Delta Sigma Theta, Sorority Incorporated, NSBE, the National Society of Black Engineers. I've been a part of that since the summer before my freshman year in undergrad. So that's almost 20 years. Oh, yeah, that's almost 20 years. The Black Church, I would say the institution, and even if it's, while I do have a church home back in Detroit, but even the larger, I think there's the buildings of the church, but even just the community aspect of what it means to be a part of the church. How do I feel about them as we've gone on? My gripes and my critiques about them, that is very much so. To your point of capitalism, I am involved within capitalism. I am a Capricorn, so money is very much so a tool that I like a lot of. So even being a part of it, my gripes with Delta or my gripes with NSBE or my gripes with the Black Church, I work within tech, so that's a very
big
institution to contribute to and put labor into, but then also be a consumer of it, whether I want to be or not. But then also the juxtaposition of how sometimes that can contradict my own like morals or things that I believe in. So even having a fine line of knowing I need employment, I think even in the time of the landscape of what tech means today in 2026, it's not just a job. Whereas if I work for some people who are Black people who work for Target, who are still actively boycotting Target, but Target is also paying for their health insurance and they direct deposit, but they're not consuming
100%.
Going to Target is very or even for me, I have worked for Amazon, and it's like while I can't 100% boycott Amazon, I can do Target. So now it's even I'm choosing this one because the other one is signing my paycheck and the mine.
Yeah, we gonna get into the money for sure.
Yeah.
How about you, Jermaine?
Yeah. No, definitely capitalism. I'm I gotta get paid. You gotta get paid, right? Like,
if it ain't about the money,
I need my money on time.
Hey, look, and they need to drop it. They need to drop it into that bank account, on a regular basis, or we're gonna have some problems, right? Like, every dollar and dime, I need it. But I do. I'm also, a member, a brother of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated. So I have my gripes. We have our issues and challenges and things like that. But at the end of the day, the values and ideals that I've gained as being a part of that institution has had an impact on my life that is just immeasurable. And I think these other components of institutions, like we have to get credentialed in certain ways to be able to navigate the career space, right? Like to get to that bag. And so going to Michigan State University, going to the University of Michigan, being alums of those respective institutions has created pathways for me to be able to enter certain spaces. But just know that my experience as a Black man navigating those spaces was not like everyone else, right? It's just like yours is navigating as Black women in some of these, PWIs and institutions that we, quote unquote, have to get credentialed in order to be viewed as a serious professional going through those spaces. It's an experience that, had I not had some of the relationships and connections, I don't know if I would have been able to make it through. So, while it benefits me at this point, getting through those institutions, man, it's a struggle.
Can y'all think about some institutions? When I think about the ones that really shape urban planning and the way that we experience cities, obviously you think of the government itself as an institution. You think of all of the different transportation providers, whether it's the bus provider or the train provider, MTA. You think of the police department as an institution. You think of the city planning team and all the different levels of government. But you also think of the institution of living. I think of living, being a city dweller, being someone who chose to live in an urban environment versus a rural environment. I think in some ways, when you're thinking about institutions as a practice, where you choose to live, whether it's urban, rural, or suburban, can also be, and if you're buying into the institution of urbanism and living in a city and that being the way that you choose to navigate versus buying into the institution of a more rural lifestyle. So some things for us to think about also. And you guys named them, and I was putting this together. I'm thinking of Black institutions also. You guys just named the Divine Nine immediately comes to mind. HBCUs immediately come to mind. The Black Church comes to mind. Are there any others that I'm missing that are Black specific institutions?
I have one, but I also have a question because I'm going to say the NAACP, but apparently online people started saying the NAACP, and I didn't get that memo, and I didn't vote on that. So I'm saying the NAACP, but I'm saying it because, like, why did we take the double out? That's my own personal gripe. I've heard some people say it's because it got confused with the NCAA, but like,
I'm not gonna confuse the two. If you part NAACP, you're not gonna confuse the two.
If you watch sports and if you're Black, you know the difference.
100%.
Absolutely. If your daddy named you Charles, I'm calling you Charles. Right. That's what it's going on. I'm calling you NAACP. Right. So, I ain't calling you Chuck. We calling you Charles. Come on, man.
The NAACP, the National Council of Negro Women. It's the 100 Man March. Is that an institution, or is that just built off an event?
I think Black Power is an institution.
It's
Black Power.
Pro-Black liberation. His Black Panther Party. Even if that's not still active, the ideals have still lived on.
Yeah.
Even as today, you have people within the NAACP quoting the Black Panthers as far as the work that they've done.
In a lot of ways, I mean, another thread that I like us to talk about or tease out is that when we talk about Black institutions, a lot of the ones that we even named informally or not even trying to name on purpose came out of not being accepted as Black people into the institutions that existed before, right?
These all started at the top of the century.
Right. I mean, for Jasmine, Jermaine, y'all work in economic development, right? There's a reason that we focus on Black or brown, neighborhoods and developers is because we are shut out of the system that helps to generate wealth for the rest of our peers, our white peers specifically. And even for sororities and fraternities, these were created because we were not allowed to go to the same schools. And when we were still discriminated against. So it became a way for us to activate amongst ourselves and create
HBCUs,
because institutions also bring power and also bring a structure of support, right? And so, like, how have you all navigated, like, leaning into the institution that exists or finding a place that is specifically for Black folks in the various ways? Because again, we have informal institutions. How have y'all navigated that?
It's an interesting. Go ahead, Jermaine.
I was going to say one of the ways, and I'll use a very specific example. Being working in economic development, small Black businesses in the city of Detroit have never had the resources or the coordination that's necessary to access resources at a state level, local level, regional level to be able to grow and thrive their businesses. And so, one of the organizations that I'm a member of, I'm actually the treasurer. Is the Michigan Black Business Alliance, and that was created as a means like going into the pandemic, when all of that pandemic money was flowing around. You had a lot of the Chamber of Commerce that was focused on predominantly white businesses or major businesses, so to speak, to make sure that they had the resources that they needed to navigate that. And so we had somebody in our community, Charity Dean, who's the CEO and the founder of what was then the Michigan. The Detroit Black Business Alliance, to kind of bring all of these businesses together in order to advocate to get those types of resources that they were being shut out of. And so I do think that it's still necessary, in a vein of just ensuring that, the survival of our businesses, of our community, and being able to thrive, that you got to have those types of relationships where you can learn the lessons, you can share information, you can share resources, and you can ensure that not just your business, but collectively the business community that you're trying to support and see thrive is successful. And so those types of institutions are still necessary and something that I'm grateful to be a part of.
And even within institutions that are more nationwide and not specific to Black people, like ULI, for example, the Urban Land Institute, or even APA, they have within them the Black and Planning Division or the Black Real Estate Professionals Division. An organization in California that I'm very active in is AREP, African American Real Estate Professionals. And it's an organization that was created because Black people weren't allowed to have their realtor's license in the state of California. So they had to create a separate institution to get certified and to be able to broker deals and sell property and all of those things. And so this organization is one that has benefited me in a million ways. And I'm on like their emerging professionals council and did a lot of things with their social media and stuff like that. And to me, the power of those institutions really comes from the fact that we collect ourselves under these similarities, but we share resources in these smaller groups. And that, to me, when we talk about the professional aspect of it, is the most important piece. Like, I can go and read information and sit on a million different market update panels, but it's different when I sit on one within AREP, because when I go to the national real estate conference and we talk about things happening, they don't talk about the fact that Altadena burned down in California. And that was a whole Black neighborhood, right? But when I go to the AREP one, that's part of the conversation. And so it helps us bring into focus the things that are really impacting our community, but through the lens of our intelligent mind and our professional mind.
Yeah, that and I guess I would pose the question, even though from our definition of institutions, within like my time when I worked at Spotify, and they have different employee resource groups.
Yeah.
And while there are ones for engineering, I started one that was for Black engineering, because one of the main issues was having support for Black engineers to be promoted in leadership positions, who then make hiring decisions and things we want to focus on and all of that. So even kind of how you were saying, Jasmine, of like, I'm in this institution, but within the general population of engineering, we're not even talking about how certain things disproportionately affect Black people, women, things like that. It gets lost in the sauce. So unless you have something that is directly discussing those impacts, I found that they will likely get moved from the agenda and will never be a focus point. So even having these certain it's almost like institution inception within something to narrow down to really get to the nitty gritty. And even as we could see in society, like even within the Black engineering that was focused on Black engineers, it still benefited everyone. Even when we focus on issues that are pertinent to a specific group, it ultimately benefits everyone. So even I think of things kind of inception within institutions that I'm already in, what niche or specific institutions exist in those that serve these same purposes, or same, really our goals was the same as the NAACP. Yeah.
Well, because we're there, let's take it to that point, because we're talking about the mission, right, and the purpose of why institutions were created. So, for example, you'll take APA, and I don't have their mission in front of me, but I'm sure it's something along the lines of helping planners navigate through communities and benefit their society. The same thing with ULI. But I think about how well an institution's mission aligns with their actual output into the world. And could there be a scenario in which you need to create a new institution because this one, its mission isn't to specifically, for your point, Dayna, the mission of the National Society of Engineers is just engineers. It ain't got nothing to do with race or diversity or equity or inclusion on its face. So could there be a scenario in which we might ask for something too much from an institution that was never designed to support what we're asking them to support?
I think it matters how those institutions kind of came about, right? Like, and so for the National or the American Planning Association, it didn't come about in a way where in its founding that it included us, right?
Mm-hmm.
It came about as like, this is a career path, this is what it is, and then they created and gave themselves this power inherently because they were one of the first organizations that kind of gather planners in that way, and on a national level. And then it became, who were the first members, right? And we know in the urban planning, like there weren't there were folks who I believe are Black planners, but they were not officially or Black urban planners and a part of that APA association, right? And so I do think it's necessary for us, and particularly in our communities to create our own institutions and our own spaces. And in that way, from the very beginning, we're a part of the thought process of how do we protect, how do we grow it, how do we prepare it for the future, and how do we collectively utilize that power to kind of navigate policy, to navigate the career paths for folks, and how do we mentor and how do we do some of these things, because those larger institutions don't consider us in that way because they were to your point after that they didn't consider us from the beginning in that
Right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that. And as somebody who prides myself, the reason I call myself the Olivia Pope of planning, okay, I said I wasn't gonna give a reason, I was gonna give a reason. It's because reason. I like coming into inflexible institutions. I don't know, I get a kick out of it, and changing them from the inside out. It is I'm not saying that it's always successful. I'm not saying that you actually change the entire institution, but in every institution I've worked with, I have changed it to a point that has made the outcome for community members better, right? And it goes down to changing an internal policy about professional development all the way to an external policy that allows more community members to have access to capital, right? I've seen the gamut and been at the forefront of those types of changes. I think in my professional experience, and one of the things that I am good at is being able to call an institution's bluff on its words versus its actions. And I think for me, from my POV, especially being ingrained in APA as long as I have been, because I still am I'm a certified planner, and you talked about institutions, and I wrote an essay on my Substack recently about if AICP was worth the value for Black women. And so if you get a chance, go read that for those who are listening at home. But ultimately, these institutions are a business, right? They have a POV, and they make profit off of our kind of investment in their pitch, right? Which is like, oh, if you become a certified planner, you will have access to these types of things, or you will be held to these standards.
And you also pay dues, don't you? Pay annually, right? You pay fees into them.
It's like $1,000, and that don't include a conference. The conference early bird was $800 for the Detroit conference. So and I've seen the internal budget. I've seen the internal budget. I know how much our CEO makes, and this is why I was on the board asking very pointed questions about the infrastructure of this organization and how we were saying we were showing up, but then internally, interpersonally, we were not doing those things, right? And we were not living the values that we said we have. So to your original question, Jasmine, institutions over time have understood what's more palatable in order to make investment, and also may even have an earnest desire to do well, right? We saw a whole bunch of DEI programs come out of 2020. And some of those were well-meaning, and some of those were jumping on a bandwagon, right? Yeah. And APA and any other institution is not exempt from that. They absolutely did that too. And then when people stop looking, that you can tell which institution is actually down and going to do what it's going to do. And from my personal experience, being at the national level, understanding the information I had in front of me, I knew that this institution was no longer actually trying to make an earnest effort to back up what it was saying. And I think for all of us, we get to choose when we plug in and plug out of a system based on how we see that system perpetuating harm or undoing harm based on what they said that they would do. And for me, as a neurodivergent person, if you're not going to be shit, just say that up front, and we'll have less friction. It's when you say you're going to do something, and I say like,
just say that.
Just say that. But then that wouldn't be palatable, right? Then, I've seen emails where, our leadership has emailed our lawyer and said like, oh yeah, they want to have the perception of looking this way, right? Yeah, literally verbatim. And so it is about optics and how we look. And so for Black folks, we have to decide with our dollar and our time, right? Because it's not just about money, it's about time and effort. how do we want to hold these institutions accountable? And when they are not held, when they don't want to be held accountable, how do we then go make our own NAACP, or how do we go then make our own thing? And even with the planning in the Black community, they're still underneath the infrastructure and still have limited resources and still don't have the resources that they need to do the programming that they have, right? And so there's lots of mixed feelings in that, but we all have to make a choice of how we buy in and don't buy in.
Yeah, the thing that sticks out to me when I think about our expectation from institutions versus their mission, this Target situation comes up top of mind for me, because Target is a store designed to make money. And they're definitely one of the people who jumped on the DEI bandwagon, and we're going to do all these things because people were paying attention to it. And so when they stopped doing it, I was like, yeah, I figured they were going to do that. That's not their goal. That's not Target's purpose of their business. I think that's one of the examples where I think if we want a store that supports us and champions us, we got to create the store that supports us and champions us. Now, that's not to say that you should or shouldn't boycott. That's your decision to make. But I think when we think critically about what we're expecting from certain institutions, APA 100%. If y'all are going to be designing and planning communities, you got to have diversity and equity and inclusion in your goal. If you're doing engineering work and you're building bridges and highways, you got to do all of that stuff. If you're selling clothes and groceries, you definitely need to, in your operations, be thinking about how you can strategically locate your stores, how you can strategically serve your community. But I don't know if you need to have all of these extra goals around hiring and spending and procurement, or at least you can have them, but I don't know if we should be able to, if we can expect that from those organizations and hold them to that. So I just want to get your thoughts on it, even if it's not Target or
specifically with Target, and like I'll say this is my emotion. So Target, even prior to, I'd say, the boycotts and prior to 2020, from a NSBE, National Society of Black Engineers, Target was an avid supporter of NSBE as far as our national conventions, being a sponsor, sponsoring like certain things that within that organization we not relied on their donations and things like that, but they were a large contributor. If y'all have been to Essence in New Orleans, the Essence Festival, Target was a huge supporter of being able to bring in money and really fund the activations and the floor, especially as Target got into like beauty brands and things like that. So almost to Nina's point of like saying, if you just don't want to do this, say that up front. Target was saying it up front.
And then change their mind.
We support y'all. And then Target is headquartered in Minneapolis. So then for them to be on the ground within George Floyd, even within the ICE raids, it's like you're there, you're deep into the community of, I think of like Delta Airlines in Atlanta, or things where, or Home Depot within Atlanta, where you're so enmeshed in the city that it is a certain responsibility of even the Atlanta airport, like historically being able to employ so many Black people within Atlanta. That's a benefit. You're in the community at that point. So even if it's not in your mission statement, you're cosplaying like you care. So even Target for me, like I'm done, and I'm done for emotional reasons, not just, ooh, this is a boycott, I'll find somewhere else to shop. It is an inconvenience for me. I shop at Target all the time, but like, as a member of NSBE, as a lover of Essence, as someone who's trying to get funding, when I was trying to get like funding for NSBE in undergrad or different things for companies, that money was needed. And there's how easily it was removed. It's not like the money's not there.
They just put it somewhere else.
It's not like they're having a rough year. You know, they just don't have it. They're just not allocating it to this anymore. And it's a slap in the face. It's like, if you
it's a change in priorities.
Yeah, like don't cosplay this, and then the moment that is inconvenient, at the slightest moment that is inconvenient, then you're gonna pivot as an institution who kind of woven themselves in the community almost.
Yeah,
to me that's almost worse than just saying, nah, I'm good.
That's the corporate social responsibility aspect of it, right? If you're gonna be a corporation, an institution operating in a place, you do have some sort of corporate social responsibility, a social responsibility to the geography or the community that you serve. Whether you're, I think of Rutgers University is located in New Brunswick, New Jersey. It's a huge institution. If they want to do a building expansion, y'all are impacting the entire city of New Brunswick, the entire towns surrounding it. So they have to be mindful of those things because these institutions exist. Yeah, you exist in a physical, you both exist in a physical space, right? How do you operate the land, or you build a wall? Like Columbia University is notorious for excluding the Harlem neighborhood that they exist in and actively building walls and policing it to keep people from Harlem. And USC is the same way, right? Keep people from the neighborhood accessing the institution, but the institution is in my neighborhood. But Jermaine, I'll let you speak to it also.
Yeah, no, I agree with that point, and I think the piece with Target that kind of hurt. I'm gonna speak from a personal perspective. That kind of hurt me and my family is that you had the illusion of a safe space, a third space for community, to the point where I don't know how y'all family operate, but we call it Target.
Target, yes.
That's how we used to call it Target, right? And in the Black community, you give it nicknames.
We
you give all these
for
things.
it.
It's like
yeah,
you part of the family, you part of the circle, right? And so you had the illusion of this relationship with an institution that is all about capitalism. But to your point, Dayna, they had invested, they had supported our causes in a major way. And then when the time came to stand up to a bully, they decided that wasn't that it was no longer their fight. And and I think that doing that has created irreparable harm to their brand, obviously, to the point where Jabal Bryant out here saying like, "Yo, we done with the boycott, all this and that." But to folks like you and I, like, yeah, you know what I mean? Like, bro, you got more important things to be focused on. Focus on your relationship with God first and foremost,
absolutely,
and lead the selection of where I go and spend my money to me and my family. And so that's where I think this illusion of a safe space, or this illusion of a real kind of relationship and being invited to the picnic or invited to the circle in some form or fashion. And then when you violate, you already know, like, nah, we see you trying to come to the door. It's like, nah, you can't come back.
Have y'all seen Sinners?
Oh yeah.
So, no, I can't do scary. I was terrified. I tried, but I was too scared. I was like, I'm scared.
I was gonna watch it in the daytime, and it won't be that scary. But I was gonna make a reference to say I feel like Target is Grace and Sinners, of like, we allowed her into the community, thought it was a safe space, and then when it was no longer to your benefit, you let the vampires in, and now we are where we are now.
How often does that happen to Black people, where we let either an individual person or an institution into our community because they presented themselves as trustworthy, and then they show their real colors? You know what I mean?
Yes.
I mean, that is the core of white supremacy and capitalism, though, right? Is to be friendly enough and then extract, right? Yeah. To use our dollars, because the Black dollar, our bodies, does have a lot of strength for our set of the population, and for the differences in wealth creation that this country has constructed, since this country was built on the backs of slaves, right? So people got literal rich, universities, all these different things. I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but then that translates into, oh, we've used you, and now that you're free, oh, well, we don't need you, we're going to make it super hard for you to exist here. And so I think that's why there is a little bit of a pressure point for Black folks, specifically with main institutions, is that we know we're othered. We've been othered since we arrived here. And so it's almost like, in order to not survive, but we try to make our own shit. How many Black bottoms got burned down to the ground because they were doing too well, right?
Or a highway ran through the middle of it.
375, 375 in Detroit. New Orleans has same thing. Yes.
How many Targets existed before Target even existed? Black Targets, I mean. How many Black Targets existed before Target even existed, but they weren't allowed to be successful within these institutions of capitalism and white supremacy? So then we're holding institutions that we have some type of grasp with some type of level of like, hey, we want to spend our dollars with you, but we at least need to know that you're going to show up for us when we need you to. And Target leaned into that. But then, as was stated, get backed out. And I think also APA has leaned into that. ULI has AIA has leaned into that. And then as soon as we actually need them to use their power and privilege in order to help us, then that's when it's like, well, I never said that. Oh, well, you interpreted that differently. Oh, you're interpreting how to live these values in a way that I'm not. And then they start playing that semantics game, which is why, again, we start making our own institutions. But then, and Jasmine, I think you both know this. Then you get to the underwriting, right? Let's say I want to make the next Black Target. The underwriting, oh, well, you want to make it in a community that, this is too risky for the bank, right? And we're going to have this conversation at the activation about capital and how to access capital, community banking institutions. But like, we all know that, again, these different institutions and systems are even shaping how we're able to show up as Black folks and spend our money.
Can you give a little for the non-planner here? I know like a textbook definition of underwriting, but can you provide like, why, if we wanted to do a Black Target, that's not assuming we had the capital, like, oh, look, I got Jeff Bezos gave me a whole bunch of money.
Jasmine, this is what
would be
I feel like you and Jermaine both do it on different levels. You're more at the bank, like at the bank level, and then Jermaine, you come in to help with
is it a loan? Is it property?
Well, I mean, you're gonna need, right? So if you want to open up a store, it doesn't even need, say you don't even want to do a big old Target, say you want to open up a storefront, you're gonna need capital to lease the space or to buy the space, but you're also going to need to underwrite your business. So what are you going to have in your store? What's going to be your inventory? What are you going to sell? And then you're going to need generally a loan, unless you just balling out of control and you could stock all this stuff up on your own. You're going to need some sort of business loan, either a startup one to get the space or a startup one to get the inventory. And this is where people like me come into place, where I have a interesting dynamic with this concept, is because all of the parameters in underwriting, I won't say all, but I would say majority of the parameters in underwriting devalue and undervalue things associated with Black people in Black neighborhoods. And so if you want to open up your store, I'm going to use LA, for example, because that's where I'm sitting, but we could also use Brooklyn. If you want to open up your store in Soho, cool, we could do that, no problem. But if you want to open up your store, well, I can't even say Best Buy no more, because what is Best Buy these days? But if you want to open up your
Best Buy,
like old Best Buy, you want to open up your store there, unless you have all the means to do it on your own, there's gonna be some hurdles you might not get. I think anybody seen Beauty Shop, the movie Beauty Shop with Queen Latifah? Remember when she went to the bank and they were like, I'm gonna give you this, and she's thinking 150,000, and they was like, no, 1,500. That's all we're gonna be able to give you for your beauty supply store in Southwest Atlanta. So that's gonna be the challenge.
In those neighborhoods, it's harder because even when you said Soho, you would think the real estate is more expensive in Soho. It's more of a prime location. So my naive brain would think it would be harder to get in prime location, even whereas Bed-Stuy would be less of a prime location, but because it's predominantly Black neighborhood, that's going to be
there's going to be things that they're going to ding, right? They're going to say, oh, well, the crime is this, or the median household income is this. And Target's notorious for that. Wow. They have a requirement. Target in their site location of, and I'm sure every store does this, but I know this from doing my research years ago. We were doing information studies on like food deserts and what it takes for a grocery store to decide, I'm going to put my location, I'm going to build a store at 1500 Crenshaw Boulevard versus 1500 Wilshire Boulevard. Target looks at what not just the median household income surrounding their site, but the median disposable income, right? So if a neighborhood has a certain median household income, but they also have higher debt or more expenses, that's not one that they want to go to. They want to go somewhere where there's a lot of excess disposable income. People are going to be coming in the store, wasting their money, spending all their time because they just got it like that. And that's how Target in particular uses it. The Dollar Tree, for example, or Dollar General has a totally different business mindset. They're going to go to the neighborhood that's lower income because that's their demographic.
Right. Wow.
Yeah. And I'm gonna just share some quick game too for folks in the space, because when you're going and talking to these banks, there's a very specific kind of criteria that they're looking at. They typically call it the 5 C's of credit, right? Like, and so when you're thinking about opening a business and going to talk to a bank about a loan for your business, they're looking at 5 different things. So they're looking at character, which they utilize your credit history as determining your character. So like in our community, character means something totally different, right? It's like, is this person trustworthy? Does this person have this person operating a business? Are they a pillar in their community and some of those things? Then you go to capacity, the ability to be able to kind of repay what you're borrowing. And then the one of the major pieces that kind of set us up for failure is because of the historic disenfranchisement of our communities over time, the capital, the assets that they require to even qualify you for a loan can be a barrier for us, right? So that capital piece, those assets, like what money do you have in the bank? What money do you have saved up? Do you have some savings, a retirement, or something that you can utilize? And then collateral. Do you own a home? Do you own a vehicle? Do you own a rental place or something like that that could be utilized to help you get the loan? And then finally, this idea of the purpose of the loan, right? Like, and so you think about going into, let's just say, a Bank of America, and you're talking about opening up a barber shop or opening up
A
a
do-rag store.
a cheesecake. Like, you like, look, I make the best cheesecake in Michigan, and so I've won all these awards, and this is what I want to do. They might look at that and say like, oh, that's great, but the market can't bear that, right? But they don't know our community specifically.
Yeah,
So
wow.
those five factors being, how these banks are making decisions often put us at a disadvantage
Yeah.
before we even walk in the door. So organization like, like community development finance institutions, CDFIs, and other organizations like that can provide some of that capital and may lean more on your character or may not require some of the assets and the security is oftentimes a better route for us to take in our first business as opposed to going straight to a bank.
And the
Sounds
piece
about
there,
right.
Jermaine, you brought up a great point about the CDFIs, because a lot of businesses will go CDFI route or more smaller lenders instead of going to a big
And
bank. They
explain
might
what
go.
a
A CDFI
is
is a
for
community
CDI.
development. A CDFI is a community development financial institution. And so it's a financial institution with a community focus. Their whole thing is that they provide financing, whether that's direct to an individual entity like a business or financing for larger type of projects that fill the void between what the bank won't do and what your individual capital will. And we've had a conversation. One of my classmates, Natasha Dow from Georgia Tech, works at a CDFI down in Atlanta, and her whole CDFI is like all these micro loans for really small businesses, like a loan for 500,000 or something like that, or 50,000, or even $1,500. You just need a new computer to get yourself going, or you just need to buy a freezer in your corner store. Those small loans, because Wells Fargo not trying to hear that. If you just need 1,500, you should take that out to your savings account and go on about your day. That's what they would tell you. But a CDFI, for some people, that's money. I need to get some money for that.
That's
So that's where
I may not even have the
CDFIs
savings that they're just assuming I could go to pull it out.
Or I might have a kid. I need to use it for them.
That may be something medical that the insurance is not covering, and that is allocated for something. Yeah.
For sure. And that mission, because I work at a CDFI in West Detroit in the city. And so one of the things, like my entire portfolio is made up of Black and brown businesses, right? Like, and so we're doing everything from giving some of those smaller type grants to providing like loans up to $2.5 to $3 million. And we can do that because our dollars are supported through, we've gotten them through federal grants, or we've gotten them through philanthropy foundations who provide dollars to operate in this space, and we can help folks with maybe some of those operation costs and help them kind of do their business plan, put them in a better position, surround them with kind of wraparound services like, the things that you need to be successful as a business. You need an accountant, you need an attorney, you need somebody who's going to advocate for you. You're going to need to have a good point of sale system that's going to help you with your inventory. Like this system is better than this system. So being able to have those types of conversations, in particular with folks who have been disenfranchised for so long and have faced so many barriers to get into space, now we're putting them on a pathway to help them create that generational wealth and to create this fabric of our community where it's a for us by us situation.
Immediately.
And it doesn't always, it doesn't mean that it's totally perfect, because there are there are pros and cons to CDFIs as well. But it's one of those things that we don't know as a tool and an option that's out there in our community. So if a bank says no, there may be another financial institution like a CDFI or someone that can meet you where you are to help you get to where you want to be.
While we're in that point, I think that's great as we begin to move towards the end of the episode. I feel like we're talking about community ownership and the value of having institutions that support us. And so, Jermaine, I know one of the challenges of a CDFI is where your dollars come from that you're placing, and Nina being the lead of a nonprofit, the philanthropic aspect of it. Who gives you the money?
Industrial complex.
Who gives you the money can determine, not only does determine what your goals are, what you can do. So let's have that conversation. Is how does all of that come into play when we're talking about institutions either supporting or causing harm to neighborhoods because they're getting the money from someplace else? And what is the true value in us being the ones to put money into the institutions that we support so that they can support us in return? And I'll just share a quick example. There's a nonprofit out here in LA before I let you guys go into it. There's a nonprofit out here in LA that started with doing like yoga in the park, and they would take donations, and that's how they would grow. And over the years that I've been here, they've grown bigger and bigger, and now they have sponsorships with Gatorade and Nike and all these different things. And I know the guys pretty. So I said to them one time, I was like, I see you guys having these sponsorships. I think it's great, and you guys are growing, but I want to make sure that you're still being supported by us because we loved what you were doing. And I don't want to see your programming change or your actions change because now Nike is telling you
cater to the sponsors.
We have to do this and not do that. And he was like, no, he said we get a lot of, because the sponsors will reach out, hey, can we do this? Can we partner? Can we partner? And if
you start budgeting based off of those donations as opposed to community donations, that's immediately where not scope creep, but cost of living, like as an individual, that income keep going up and your expenses keep going up, that you become a different person.
The golden handcuffs.
Yeah, it's the golden handcuffs.
100%.
They got me.
Yep.
Look, they got me. But like, how do we think about that too?
Jermaine, you can go first.
No, Nina, go ahead. You got it. Go ahead.
Well, I just gonna talk about it from the nonprofits. I told y'all like the first half of the majority of my career was in government, which is different, right? We always begging and borrowing in government too. Don't get it wrong, but it's a little bit different where like your nonprofit is so reliant on foundations or government contracts or what have you. And even with this change in administration, I had to do an unexpected layoff of 25% of our staff, not because we did anything wrong, not because we mismanaged our money. Right. In fact, we had a great year the year before. We left 2024 on a high, like, okay, great. And then January 2025, it all crumbles literally based on who is in leadership at the national level. Right. And so what people have to understand is that the same money issues we have at a hyper local level, we have with the infrastructure of, again, progressive policy, progressive institutions, and progressive change makers being able to be funded. Communities already know what our problems are. I knew what the problems were with Detroit and the distribution of wealth when I was 10 years old. It's that communities are under-resourced.
Why they got it and I don't?
Right. It's really not that. It's really not that difficult.
Yeah.
Right. We know exactly what the problem is. It's about capital and who controls capital. Right. And every institution, nonprofit specifically, has to decide what their line is as far as taking in resources. There are some, even in my organization, this is another generational conversation that we've had. I mentioned it on the previous episode about calling what's happening in Palestine a genocide, which is what I individually believe in. And obviously I work in a atmosphere in which most people believe that. But I understand that not everybody believes that, right? And saying like, do we take funding from because a lot of corporations have nonprofit arms, right, that are named something else, or billionaires have their foundations that are named after their families, and they support oil, or they support, sending aid to Israel, right? And we've had to have our own internal discussion about like the philanthropic industrial complex and what that means. And when institutions cause harm, what is your comfortability with either still taking that capital and doing something with it, or saying like, no, off principle, we're going to say this is our line and we're no longer going to take money from that institution. And having integrity around money is a privilege. It is a privilege, right?
Yeah.
Especially when we're dealing with communities where we want to be able to help our community members and constituents faster, have more capacity, all of these different things. And it's really up to leadership of the different organizations and in our communities to decide what our lines is. And for everybody, even if we, as we talked about Target, right, we all kind of said a different version of something where it's like, I was able to participate in maybe this boycott, but not that one, right? We all kind of make these decisions. And for me, it's just about being open and honest for it, right? Being open and honest about it and making the best decision for you and your family, but then also thinking about the bigger contextual picture, because down to even, I'll simplify the underwriting to like the report card of if you're going to get a loan or not. A lot of the stuff on that report card or test that we didn't even have a chance to study for.
Right.
You're based
Sounds
on
like
your zip
standard
code
testing.
where you're born, your credit score is determined based on is closer tied to the zip code that you're born in than your personal character. And also, credit scores are new. They just got invented maybe in the last like 50 to 70 years, right? And that was another way to exclude people from being able to participate in the market. Right?
100%.
And so we have to continue to keep ourselves abreast of the systems that are working against us. How do we infiltrate those systems if we can, and how do we still, in the sphere of our control, do our best to not perpetuate more harm while also trying to do harm with the capital that we do have as Black folks? How can we, with the capital that we do have, with the sphere of influence that we do have, how do we make positive change? So that's my POV.
I would say, just to add to yours, Nina, even just thinking of now in 2026, how so many of these institutions are monopolies. Like now there's, even to your point of like, it's a privilege to have, think of money in an ethical way, but even now there's not even different options. Like, again, in a previous episode and part 2 of this, we talked about like how knowing who the parent company of media is, but when you roll up and you realize it's the same 3 white men that's controlling everything, and to opt out of everything would be to opt out of
impossible.
Anything would essentially be to opt out of everything. That then it is kind of how do I navigate this and choose wisely when it's not like I have, as an example of food, it's not like I have McDonald's versus Burger King. When you look up and you realize, oh, they're all the same, or it's just they snap a different logo on it, but it's still coming from the same leadership. To be able to think of that as well while still maintaining integrity.
Jermaine, what are your thoughts on that, about the necessity of community backing financially the institutions that are then supposed to in turn support us, or financial support of institutions overall?
Yeah, no, I mean, I can't say it any better than how Nina, spoke about it, because we deal with some of the same issues, because we're talking about, small Black and brown businesses, folks who don't have assets, who or might have limited assets, or might not have, accessibility to investors in a way that, say, if you get shut down from a bank, you get shut down from a CDFI. There are some folks who are like, look, I'm gonna call my cousin up, or I'm gonna call my uncle, aunt up, or whatever, and be able to get some investors to support their vision. And so I think, trying to maintain that integrity in the work that you do is extremely important. And I think being transparent about, not only with who you're accepting money from, right, about like, but who you're providing the money to, and saying like, look, here's my boundaries, here's what I will not do, like being very clear and upfront about those types of things with those organizations. And so there are foundations that they might have a lot of money and they might be able to provide us some capital, but it's not like I'm not going to be in that meeting because of some of the things that I disagree with, or some of the things that just don't align with our organization as a whole, and what we're trying to do. And in a city like Detroit, like, look, everybody understand like how tight it is with the money. Everybody got like 2 or 3 hustles. Like, it's a real thing out here. So you're trying to get it how you live. But at the end of the day, all money ain't good money, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
and so for us, you have to be able to kind of have that discernment and be able to understand what you're getting yourself into, because sometimes you might want to go in a battle with a wolf, a fellow wolf, in these spaces, and go, and you might be able to handle that battle. But sometimes you think you're going into battle with a wolf, and it's a pack of people who are standing behind that organization or standing behind those folks that can make a real difference. And so I think that exists on both sides. It exists on the community side, and that's why it's important to build coalition, build relationship, be genuine in how you're approaching people. So when the time comes and they need to support you, or the time comes and you say like, look, I can't do that, they understand why, because they have been there with you from the beginning, and they understand that you have their best interest in heart. So, I this is one of those things that we're navigating really right now in the city,
Yeah.
because especially with Trump and pulling dollars away, like some of these relationships are going to look weird and unnatural for people. But if it gets to the bottom line of serving the mission of Detroiters and serving the mission of our people, we got to make sure that we stand on business.
100%. And for me, as I say my last few words before I take us out, I think about it from the receiver's perspective. I think that it's important for us as residents of a place or as community members to place our financial tithes and offering is a real thing. Like if you have an organization that supports you, that is doing good things in your neighborhood, donate to them. Shop at that store. Don't leave people hanging and then be upset when stuff closes down, or when they don't have any money, so they have to go get money from somewhere else, and now their goals change. Well, did you ever put money in the NAACP? Did you ever donate to that candidate's campaign? Because if you didn't, you're part of the problem. And that's to me where I think about is I always think about how many institutions that are supposed to be supporting the causes of Black people get, for lack of a better word, co-opted because Black people don't put their money in. I'm not saying it's our fault in any way, shape, or form. It's just like you have to put your money in there to be able to, it's an investment. When you invest in these organizations, they're able to invest in you back, because if someone else fills your void, someone else's goals are going to get to be in the front and not yours.
Yeah.
Yes. And I just want to add, sorry, Dayna, to this thread, because I think recently, especially since I've been running a nonprofit, I have also become more conscious and held myself accountable, because I'm like, oh shit, like it is hard to run a nonprofit. There are not a lot of Black leaders running nonprofits or running these types of, I mean, we are out there, but obviously we don't get as much support. Sorry, I don't mean to say that we're because we are in these spaces. We are usually small, outnumbered, but we often don't get the same amount of support. So even for me, I found nonprofits that of either my friends that are running nonprofits, and now I do like a monthly donation of like somewhere between $10 and $15, so that it's more consistent, so that people know, okay, yeah, I can't give you $500 all at once, or I can't give you whatever all at once. It could be as simple as pledging $10 to your friend's nonprofit every month or every quarter or what have you. And that's a place that I've definitely had to grow just based on experience. And even putting together this activation, which I am so proud of, I had to make a decision of, if I raise no money, what can I do? Me and Dayna had this conversation plenty of times, where it's like, I'm willing to invest my own capital. Exactly. No, seriously. Yeah. Like,
that's how I got to be. That's how you got to be.
And make all the deposits and pay interns out of pocket. Shout out to Sam. Like, do whatever we got to do, because I was like, I believe in this and I want this for us. And trying to even fundraise for this has been interesting, because obviously my network is of Black planners, but I also know we do not have a ton of capital. So like trying to even go out and say like, this is something you should invest in, this is something you should donate to, which there will be donation information. I finally signed an MOU with the fiscal agent, so like we will be able, and I just off faith, I've been able to raise $8,000, but we still need more money to make this entire thing free and to ensure that it can be free. But like, yeah, it's tough out here, from everything from, even how we deal with our nonprofit friends, or how we want to make activations and make things that are community centered. It can be really tough. So just uplifting your message, Jasmine, of like us leaning into each other where we can, or making connections to who we know who have more power and privilege to help us all out.
Yeah. I would just to echo what you said about believing in it. I'm getting into angel investing, which is investing your own personal money into startups and businesses. But one of the main things is because you're essentially putting your own money into these ideas that haven't yet come into fruition. A lot of it is, they say, like, you're investing, but it's also you're believing in these things.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of just transactional, I'm taking my money to put something in as if I was going to a candy store, I'm giving my money and I'm getting something back, is what do I believe in? So even to the point of like keeping the money in, it's like, I believe in the NAACP. I believe in this thing, instead of just giving money. Like, even when we say tithes and offering, tithes, I believe in tithing. Let us, not necessarily the amount of money that I'm giving, but it's the action of belief. So I was just, as you were saying, like, being able to believe in the work that you're doing. I think that's a good mental model to go after when we're saying investing. It's not, yes, it is money, but it's not just a transactional action. It's I believe in you. I believe in this business. I believe in your mission. And so that's why I'm giving my money, because then when it's the belief, it's, I'm gonna give whatever I can. I'm gonna do whatever I can because I believe in you. I believe in my little cousin's basketball team, so I'm giving them money for them jerseys, even if they lose every single game. I believe in the effort. Like, that's what it is. So having a belief,
he gonna have to win
that,
some of them games.
Yeah, effort. College try.
But see, you might repost a flyer on Instagram. Like, it could be free. Like, you can repost your friends' flyers. You can attend their events. You can,
the belief doesn't have to only be money.
Yeah, there's so many different ways that you can give your time and effort to the things that you believe in. And so we just all need to practice that, especially in this political moment where we know, we Black folks, we have always known that grassroots organizing has been the way to do things. I mean, growing up in Detroit, I didn't know what scarcity was until I started going to a white school, not because I had more, but because culturally, thinking about abundance, we do that differently, about like how much we have and how much we have to give, even when we have little. And so I think we have to get back to that model of like, yeah, it's inconvenient to pick your friend up from the airport. It's inconvenient to go water somebody's plants. It's inconvenient to look after somebody's child, but that is truly what a social safety net is.
That's community.
Show up in the way that we need to, then obviously these institutions, bigger institutions, are not there to hold us up. So we have to do it for each other.
Jermaine, last words from you before we sign off today.
Listen, I think this whole conversation brings to mind. I mean, it's, Jesse Jackson left us, how folks feel about him and all of that. But he had this kind of quote about us being the community being a quilt, right? And I think that for us in this, it's not a carpet, it's a quilt. And I think for us especially in the urban planning spaces, that we have to realize that we're bringing all of these unique perspectives, but we're stronger when we stitch ourselves together and create the space for us to kind of be a part of one mission moving forward. And I think the mission needs to be, in my humble opinion, is that for the future of our communities, we need to make sure that every voice is heard, and we need to make sure that we are providing the spaces for this type of fellowship and revival for us to come together. And I think more than anything is that we respect the fact that those different points of view create a bigger, stronger network for us for the change that we want to see. So I'm grateful to be a part of this activation. This has been an amazing conversation. And thank you, Jasmine, for leading such a robust conversation.
Absolutely. Well, y'all can hear more about this conversation as we dig further in to the A Planner with a Purpose activation in Detroit beginning Thursday, April 23rd. This has been another fantastic episode of the 4 Degrees to the Streets podcast. You can follow us on Instagram, on YouTube, and on Substack at the 4 Degrees pod. Peace out, y'all. This episode is part 3 of a 3-part special podcast collaboration series bringing together 3 platforms that explore culture, community, and the future of our cities while centering voices of the marginalized. This collaboration series leads up to the A Planner with a Purpose activation in Detroit, where planners, creatives, and community leaders will come together to explore how planning, culture, and community storytelling intersect, taking place during the National Planning Conference for the American Planning Association. A Planner with a Purpose is a curated set of experiences designed to support planners and civic leaders navigating an increasingly complex and demanding moment. Grounded in care, clarity, and collective power, the event creates space for honest conversation, practical tools, and connection beyond traditional professional programming. Be sure to join us starting Thursday, April 23rd in Detroit, Michigan. For more information on the weekend, follow at A Planner with a Purpose on TikTok and IG. This series is a collaboration between the Streets Are Planning podcast in part 1, Queen Tone for part 2, and 4 Degrees to the Streets closing out part 3. The Streets Are Planning podcast is hosted by Jermaine Ruffin. Be sure to follow at The Streets Are Planning on IG. Queen Tone is hosted by Dayna Cole and Nina Idemudia. Be sure to follow them at Queen Tone Pod. 4 Degrees to the Streets is hosted by Jasmine Jones-Bynes. Check her out at the 4 Degrees Pod on IG, YouTube, and Substack. This podcast collaboration series is produced and edited by Dayna Cole of Dayna Cole LLC Audio Consultancy. Thank you for listening, and we look forward to continuing the conversation across all 3 podcasts.